Thank you, Paul. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our Global Chief Growth Officer, Billy Lager, and the always inspirational Gary Vaynerchuk.
Hi, everybody. My name is Billy Lager, and I'm the Chief Growth Officer here at Juice Plus, and I am so excited to be with all of you today, and especially excited to be introducing and talking with our guest, Gary Vee. Gary's going to be talking to us today about corporate values, inspiration, entrepreneurship, and before we jump in, I want to give you a little bit about his background. He's really one of the thought leaders in the space of entrepreneurship, social media, and values. He's written 5 best-selling books. He's the CEO of VaynerMedia. He's an early investor in companies like Facebook and Twitter and Uber, and really right now is ripping up the podcast world and has just given so many inspiration to so many people. Gary, so excited to have you today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And if it's okay, I'm just going to dive right in with some questions. So, first question is, as you know, partners are our lifeblood. And you're talking today to tens of thousands of entrepreneurs, some who are in their first couple of days at Juice Plus, some who've been here their entire career. So wanted to start with, for those who are here in their first couple of days, what advice do you give for them to think about starting their business?
So from my standpoint, it's always much harder and takes far longer to succeed than most people think in these adventures. And so my biggest piece of advice is patience. I spent years stocking shelves and helping customers on the liquor store floor, working 12 to 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, 6.5 days a week, because of our Sunday 12 to 5 schedule. And I did that, Billy, for 5-6 years at that pace. And then I started taking Sundays off, right? And so I think people see, you and I got to cross paths when you were at Hasbro and other places. Like, they see you as the Chief Growth Officer now, but they don't know all the things that you had to do to get here. And so when I think about the Juice Plus ecosystem, it's just going to take time. It's going to take time. If you're bought into the lifestyle of entrepreneurship, you're vulnerable to actually getting there. If you're in it for the bling bling and the accolades, it's going to be too hard if you're just in it for the vanity, because unless you love the process of building a business and unless you love adversity, entrepreneurship is almost impossible.
And how do you think about keeping yourself, to your point, the early journeys in some ways are always the hardest, right? You're just building and learning. How do you keep yourself motivated, and how do you think about things like building mentorship?
That's a great question. For me, I'm motivated because I can't breathe doing anything else. It was why I was such a bad student. The thought of doing anything but building a business is like the death of me. It literally rips my soul to think, I would have to do something else. So for me, it's very, very, very deep. It's so easy for me to be motivated. I'm worried that most people, and I mean most at this point because entrepreneurship is cool now, are motivated by what they're going to get. Ooh, I'm going to get a Porsche. I'm going to get a second home. I'm going to buy a boat. I'm going to get a Rolex. I'm going to have cash. And that's impossible to stay motivated for because it takes too long to get to that place. Or if you get there fast, it's usually shortcuts or illegal, and that eventually folds. So, for me, it's very easy to be motivated. I love the bad days of entrepreneurship because I love the practice, because I love my craft. As far as mentorship, I had my father, but we're very different businessmen. And I got some great mentorship around honesty and word is bond and a lot of good things from my dad, old school values. But in general, I haven't really had a lot of mentors. I've just kind of navigated the world. As a matter of fact, it's a weakness of mine. As a matter of fact, this morning when I was showering, I was thinking about Steve Ross, the owner of the Miami Dolphins, who's my business partner. And I've talked to him once in 6 months. I'm not taking advantage of the opportunities I have for mentors. But that's because for me, watching the consumer and what she or he does is really my mentor. The customer is my mentor. As far as mentorship, I enjoy it tremendously. I love being a mentor to many. And I don't think I don't think I'm cool or special or stupid for that matter. I just think I know the way I learn. Same for other people. I think if they can get value out of a mentor, I think it's a remarkable play.
And this next question actually comes from one of our awesome partners, Lisa Barrett Oliver. When you think about entrepreneurship, we tend to think of younger people. What do you say to someone who's 50 plus who wants to build a business and they come back and say it's too late? How do you approach kind of that person?
For me on that question, Billy, I just go with it practically. People are living to their mid 80s on average in a lot of places. And, I just think that they have tons of time. I just try to remind people that they're 50. I actually had this conversation the other day with a friend, 51 years old. And the final thing that broke through, I was like, look, 20 years ago, you were 31. In 20 years, you'll be 71. And I referenced a mutual business friend of ours. And once he's like, oh my God, Rick is actually 71 and still feels like my contemporary and very much alive and no thoughts of retirement home and doubling down on his business and enjoying it. Oh my God, like 31 was, 100 years ago in the way that he felt. And when he realized between 30 and 51 is what he has to go just to be his friend's age, it really hit him. And I would say, Billy, the biggest vulnerability of most people, young and old, is their relationship with time. I'm sure that you probably laugh, Billy, when 27-year-olds feel like they're running out of time and you're like, kid, if you just knew. And I think that's what 65-year-olds that are very happy in their careers and their journeys and just feel like they're getting started, feel about people that are 51. I mean, I'm 44, I turn 45 in a couple months, and 51 feels very young to me. Like I actually feel like I'm going to do my best work between 50 and 65. And so, honestly, I just have a very practical, I'm not trying to rah them up and like, it's not too late. It's actually fundamentally practical.
No, that's awesome. Thank you for that. One question. So as you said, you've been doing this since, when we first talked, I think since you were born. What happens when you hit a plateau? How do you kind of get yourself out of it or shake yourself into something new or in a new direction?
Great question. I'm big on perspective and gratitude and accountability. I call it the gap. I go first into gratitude. Hey, this month in business is a rut. I'm mad at my clients. My best employee just quit. Somebody stole some money and there's a lawsuit. And right away I go into, but my children or parents or siblings could be diagnosed with terminal cancer. And would I give a crap about any of this? No way. So I go right into gratitude. I'm grateful for what I've been gifted. Then I go into accountability, the A of GAP. What am I going to do about it? I could sell my business. I could quit. I could start a new job. I could do anything. I could downsize dramatically and use my savings to live on a beach for the rest of my life. What am I going to do about it? So I go into accountability, and then I go into perspective. I have so much more time, back to what we just talked about. I've been gifted with so much talent. I live in America, where there's a lot of opportunity for entrepreneurs. I just kind of, that gratitude and perspective can bleed into each other. And in the middle, I really focus on accountability. People who throw their hands up and say the system or my parents or this, that, and the other thing, they're always going to be depressed and unhappy. And so if you're lucky enough to live in a place that isn't run by a dictator, you have a lot of ability to be accountable. And I highly recommend people see that as the thing that leads to happiness. Most people want to point fingers, and that is their great vulnerability.
I love that. Actually, it's a good segue. It brings us into a question from another one of our awesome partners, Ben Cook. And his question is actually about that accountability and motivation. And his question is, so a lot of our partners are building teams. And, his question is, how do you motivate people that don't have that intrinsic level of motivation or accountability, especially when you're worried about maintaining your friendship with them?
That's a great question, given the context of this. Couple things. One, people's motivation is insular, and the way you help them get motivated is to make it about them, not about you. In this model, you have intrinsic financial vested interest in that person going hard. They know that, they feel that, and they may feel like you're manipulating them or riding them or don't give a crap about them, just care about what it means to your bottom line. So you have to really be authentic and a real human being and lean into your humanity as a leader and really, A, try to figure out if this is even for them. B, be okay if it's not, even though you trust a friend and you wish they were into this, it's just not going to be that case. C, find what motivates them. If they're in it for the money and the lifestyle, I already told you in question one that they're going to be vulnerable. So do they actually like selling? And D, just deploy empathy and compassion and sympathy and realize not everybody's going to be motivated as you, which is why you're at the place where you're at in your life. You know, I always told my dad, I was like, Dad, he would get so upset at his employees. I was like, Dad, you're paying them minimum wage. If you want them to work as hard as you, he's like, I worked. I'm like, if you want them to work as hard as you should give them half the business. You know, they'll work as hard as you do for their business. This is your business. And so I think some of those perspectives really help in scenarios like this.
And, you know, it's funny, you mentioned authenticity, which is one of our corporate values. And, you know, why don't you use that kind of to switch gears a little bit? Because I know a lot of folks had questions on just thinking about social media and communication, and especially in the world we're in right now where, you know, we're an in-person business that, at least for a short period of time, can't really be as in person as we'd like to be. And actually brings us to a question actually from one of our partners, Vasey Benjamin. What is the best way to communicate on social media so it comes from a heart-centered and high-integrity place?
Intent, Billy. You know, I think there is, in my opinion, there is no massive fundamental difference between in-person and online from the standpoint of intent. If you're genuinely communicating your values, what you're up to, why you want them on your team, why they should buy the product, then I think you're going to get 80% of the nuance. Where the variables lie is in A, are you just better with gift of gab in person on a couch or at a coffee shop than you are on video or written word or through pictures? And there is a communication gap there. People are skilled differently in different mediums. I'm at my best improv, on stage, in person, on video. Even though I have 5 New York Times bestselling books, I'm not my best at the written word. And so everyone has to find their way to communicate online, video, audio, or written word. And everybody needs to focus on that self-awareness, because if you layer knowing how you communicate on the internet with what your intent is, you're able to maximize what happens in real life.
Awesome. So following up on that, Gary, how do you recommend people kind of develop that social media muscle as people experiment their way into kind of what works best for them?
Reps. You know, Billy, I'm going to embarrass you here. You are in very good physical shape. I literally recall it from our first meeting years ago, and when I saw you last, you got some guns, brother. And so you did that through reps. You know, the muscles on social media come from reps. It's okay to make mistakes. The reason some people do well in the gym but not in social media is in the gym, those reps are not seen by anybody. So not being able to carry a lot of weight or having bad form or mailing it in, not seen. Social media, all those warts, those mistakes seen, and that's what scares people. So it takes a mental strength to get the reps out on social, but it is the requirement. You can't get the muscles without putting in the work. And I think about the mental aspect similar to food with physical health. Like, you can't outwork your mouth. So the food is really the mental part, like getting into self-esteem and not worrying about other people's judgments is like eating healthy. Doing the tweets and the Instagram lives and the things of that nature, that's kind of like going in the gym. So I actually make that parallel quite a bit. The mental aspect is the eating part. The posting and making the content is the in the gym part. That is how you create your social media muscles.
And when you think about, you know, social media and really the state of the world today, so we mentioned, you know, the COVID times we're in earlier. You know, if you think about it, in a lot of ways, this has accelerated trends 10 years, right? E-commerce is already growing, but moved forward 10 years. Gig work has moved forward 10 years. You know, the concept of office location or even cities and suburbs is just blowing up in front of us. what do you suggest people do in this moment to really kind of, I don't say take advantage of the time, but to live and thrive in this time where there's just so much acceleration of trends while we sort through this new world?
I think it's been the theme of this, conversation, which is, you're right. There's an ungodly amount of opportunity. And I would tell you that what I've seen from people that have won in business and in happiness, it's been predicated on, do you know yourself, and are you willing to put yourself in a position to take advantage of these macro trends based on you, not based on my advice or your advice or reading the Wall Street Journal or whatever you're listening to. And so I think that is the task at hand. Like, are you understanding of you? Do you want to live freelance and live in a city with nice weather, but maybe give up some money for that? Do you want to take advantage of e-commerce because you love selling stuff? And you're right, Billy, it's accelerated by a decade. Do you know yourself, and are you attacking it? And so that's how I see it. I don't know how else to say it. Like, I think that you have to know yourself, because there are 50, 60, 70 amazing influencer marketing is exploding. Selling your own direct-to-consumer product through the internet's exploding. Do you know yourself?
I love your fitness analogy. Certainly, it does hit home. And as a company, right, we're really a health and wellness company, right? We make products that make people healthier and live better lives. Gary, you're a role model to a lot of people, many people on this call. Who are your role models?
My mom and dad, my parents are massive role models for me around kindness, work ethic, accountability, lack of complaining. I'll say work ethic one more time because they instilled it. So, they're like way out there. I never really looked up to a business person. Like, as you know, Billy, when we were kids, Bill Gates was like, I was like, I'm not that nerdy, dude. Like, like it just wasn't like that. Like, I didn't, Ted Turner and Vince McMahon and Walt Disney were people that I was like, oh, I get that. Like, people know you and you have a business. And I went on to have some version of that and continue to build on that. But I didn't really admire or look up to anybody. I didn't do a lot of reading as a kid, so I didn't really fascinate myself in anybody. I just really, what I said earlier, paid attention to people. I admired, this is very true because I grew up in a blue collar environment and went to a school that had even lower class majority of students. So I admired single parenting moms with 4 kids, working 2 jobs, and really doing it. I admire them very much, 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 much more than J.R. Ewing from Dallas or Bill Gates or Ross Perot or people that made money in the 80s.
That's awesome. Thank you. Last line of questions just came from a lot of folks is on how we think about values and how we think about compliance. And, you and I have talked about compliance before, but would love for the group kind of to hear it, right? We need to make sure that folks kind of stay with the message of things that we can say. And even, folks get excited and may kind of go beyond the scope of what they should. How do you handle managing compliance in a kind of company like this?
Intent from the organization. I between Chase being a client, growing up in the liquor business, I think that the biggest concern I have for this model is the organization looking the other way when a teammate is breaking compliance but is driving a lot of revenue. It has always been the vulnerability of this model, and I think it is imperative to close in all behavior in a proper way. You must not make false claims. It just, winning at all costs is a good mentality and an awful thing to execute on, because it leads to vulnerability and it leads to foundational losing. And so, as you know, Billy, we've talked kind of offline, I have zero tolerance for false claims or wrong behavior because it completely undermines the brand. And no one, not even no 10 top sellers is worth that. Period. End of story. I have nothing else to say on it. It's that black and white to me.
And just one more question, Gary. One of the big topics we talk about is loyalty and how we can keep consumers within our franchise. How do you think about building loyalty within a consumer business like ours?
Follow-up. I'm a big fan of follow-up. Follow-up is a big part of this. Too many people sell and go to sleep. To me, it's the farming, not just the hunting. A lot of people here are good hunters, but once you bring the meat back to the tribe, you got to check in on that and make sure your cooks are good. And, if you want a delicious meal, it's not just shooting the buffalo or arrowing the deer. It's making sure the cooks that you bring it back to, the cleaners of the skin, the people that make the side dishes with vegetables, the ambiance of like the table and the candles are there. And it's like a nice meal, right? I think the way you get loyalty is the follow-up after the transaction, and that is a huge miss by many in the ecosystem.
And what do you think we can do to kind of helpful back to building muscles, to build that muscle on follow-up? How do we instill that?
To make it something you talk about, right, Billy? That's on you and the team. Like, talk about that, the follow-up, the check-ins, the mentorship of the individuals underneath you, the being a real mentor, maybe sometimes telling somebody this is not for you, and that's okay. Not like you suck it out. It's more like, hey, you're actually probably an artist or you'd be a great creative, but this might not be for you. Like, it's good intent, and it's about communication around its importance from the top.
This has been amazing. Just any last kind of advice just for our team before we thank you and say goodbye for this awesome conversation?
The amount of content you put out on the internet with good intent, not like cash on the bed and this is what you can, good intent, the amount, the volume of it will have a direct correlation of how much financial success you have. It is that important. Content on the internet, Pinterest, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, LinkedIn, the amount of content you put on the internet will have a direct correlation to your success.
Very helpful and clear direction on that. Gary, this was amazing having this time with you as always. Thank you so much. This is great. Thank you.
Thanks, brother. Talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Gary.